Warning, this is the story of Brendan Schaub, the guy who somehow keeps sinking lower and lower in the entertainment world, and it's all his fault. You've probably heard of him, seen him floundering in the comedy scene, and watched as he makes a complete fool of himself online. But how did it all go wrong? Let's break it down and explore why it's so easy to hate this guy, and trust me, it's not just his bad jokes. Let's break down the first major flaw in Brendan Schaub's rise. He didn't earn his success. Sure, he was a UFC fighter, but his real climb to fame had very little to do with skill or hard work. It came down to one thing, a simple connection. Joe Rogan, the undisputed kingmaker of the podcast world, opened the door for Schaub to break into comedy despite the fact that he had no real talent or experience. Now, let's be real here. If you or I tried to jump into a brand new field without a shred of preparation, we'd be laughed out of the room. But for Schaub, he got a free pass. Instead of paying his dues like every other comedian who starts small and grinds their way up, Schaub skipped the line and went straight for the gold. He jumped into a comedy special right off the bat, Gringo Poppy, and let's just say it was a disaster. The special was so bad that even Joe Rogan, who had been an early supporter, admitted that he should have stepped in and stopped Schaub from doing it in the first place. That's a huge blow, coming from the guy who essentially gave Schaub his career in the comedy world. But did Schaub take this as a wake-up call? Nope. Instead, he doubled down, blaming the audience for not getting his genius. And this is exactly where the problem lies. When you're handed everything on a silver platter, and the moment you fail, you have no foundation to fall back on. Schaub didn't have the years of grind, the resilience, or the grit that other comedians have had to develop. Instead, when things went south, he had no choice but to lash out and point fingers, because deep down, he knew that he wasn't ready for the success that came his way. The truth is, without that solid foundation built on years of hard work and learning the ropes, it was always destined to crumble, and that's exactly what happened. Here's where things get really cringy. Schaub's narcissism. The guy is absolutely obsessed with himself. Every time something goes wrong, he plays the victim. It's never his fault, it's always someone else or just haters who don't understand him. It's like he lives in his own little world, where everything revolves around him, and when the world doesn't cater to that, he flips out. Whether it's his failed comedy specials, his awkward public spats, or his constant name-dropping, Schaub can't seem to see past his inflated ego. Let's talk about his time on the King and the Sting podcast. Instead of owning up to any issues or taking responsibility for his mistakes, Schaub acted like a guy who was untouchable, as if he could do no wrong. When his co-host Theo Vaughn left the show, Schaub made it seem like Theo needed to get his life together, as if he was the one holding everything together. But here's the kicker. Since Theo left, he's been thriving, selling out shows, growing his own brand, and gaining a huge following. Meanwhile, Schaub, not so much. The difference is clear. Theo knew when to move on, but Schaub, he just couldn't stop feeding his own ego, desperately clinging to a narrative that he was the center of it all. It's like watching someone try to hold on to a sinking ship, and it's exhausting for anyone around him. And instead of reflecting on how things went wrong, Schaub doubles down on the idea that everyone else is the problem. Fans, co-hosts, even his own family. It's that classic case of narcissistic self-delusion, where nothing is ever Schaub's fault, and the world simply doesn't understand how amazing he is. And that's what makes it so tiring to watch, because you know he'll never change. The more he tries to inflate his sense of self-worth, the more disconnected from reality he becomes. But here's the thing. His fans are starting to get fed up. Schaub doesn't seem to care about his audience anymore. He's not interested in connecting with them or improving his act. He's more focused on using them to prop up his failing career. Instead of owning up to his comedic failures, he claims the audience just doesn't get him. Imagine paying to see a show only to watch someone so clearly out of their depth, who's not willing to take responsibility and instead just blames you for not getting it. That's the ultimate slap in the face for fans who actually want to support him. But this pattern doesn't stop with the audience. It's his behavior behind the scenes that really shows the cracks in his character. Whether it's his messy personal life or his inability to treat people with basic respect, Schaub's approach has always been one of self-preservation at any cost. His relationship with Bobby Lee and Kalila, for example, was a public disaster. Instead of doing the mature thing and owning up to his actions, Schaub just dug himself deeper. He could have apologized, taken some responsibility, but instead, he chose to double down on his narrative. And guess what happened? It alienated even more people. Schaub's refusal to admit fault and apologize only made him more insufferable to those around him. His ego kept him from recognizing that his audience is what's keeping him afloat. When your entire career is based on getting people to like you, alienating them is a surefire way to ensure you end up alone. It's a classic case of cutting off the very branch you're sitting on, and Schaub's inability to see this is exactly why his popularity is waning. When you're more concerned with protecting your fragile ego than respecting your fans, it's only a matter of time before they start looking elsewhere. Let's talk about Schaub's obsession with his UFC Pass. The guy just can't let go. Even though he's been out of the ring for years, Schaub continues to cling to his former identity as a fighter, constantly trying to remind people that he was once in the UFC. Instead of accepting that his time as a fighter has ended and moving forward with his new career in comedy, Schaub keeps picking unnecessary fights on social media, whether it's calling out real fighters or picking arguments for attention. It's all an attempt to feel relevant again in a world that has long moved on from his fighting days. The thing is, this desperate clinging to the past just makes him look foolish. It's like watching someone who refuses to admit that their time has passed, trying to hold on to something that no longer defines them. Schaub's failure to evolve from being the UFC fighter into the comedian highlights just how stuck he is in his old identity. He's too busy trying to hang on to past glory rather than adapting to his current reality. And here's the truth. His time as a fighter is over, and whether he likes it or not, it's time to move on. This refusal to accept his reality is what's holding him back, instead of embracing the role of a comedian or figuring out how to thrive in the entertainment world. Schaub is simply playing a role that's no longer suited for him. Every time he tries to stir up controversy with other fighters or publicly reminisce about his fighting career, he's only reminding people that he's stuck in the past, a fighter in a comedian's body, and that disconnect just makes him come across as out of touch. It's time for Schaub to let go of his old identity and focus on what's in front of him, or he'll risk fading into obscurity completely. Brendan Schaub's financial struggles have become increasingly evident, manifesting in questionable business ventures and a noticeable decline in audience engagement. His merchandise initiatives, such as the Thick CC Boy brand, have faced criticism for unauthorized collaborations and inflated pricing. For instance, Schaub's claimed partnership with Carhartt was exposed as unauthorized merchandise reselling, leading to backlash from fans and the company itself. Additionally, Schaub's podcast network, Thick CC Boy Studios, has encountered challenges. Despite hosting popular shows like The Fighter and The Kid, there has been a noticeable decline in viewership and listener engagement. This downturn suggests that his audience is becoming increasingly disillusioned with his content and business practices. In an attempt to revitalize his brand, Schaub has launched new tours and product lines. However, these efforts have not yielded the expected success, with sales figures falling short of projections. Instead of acknowledging potential shortcomings in his approach, Schaub has been quick to blame external factors, including his audience, for the lack of success. This pattern of behavior highlights a troubling reliance on his audience to sustain his financial endeavors. Schaub's failure to take ownership of his financial situation and his tendency to deflect responsibility reinforce the perception that he may not be as successful or capable as he portrays himself to be. In summary, Schaub's financial difficulties are not merely a result of external circumstances, but are also influenced by his own decisions and attitudes. His reluctance to accept responsibility and his tendency to blame others for his shortcomings contribute to the ongoing challenges he faces in both his career and personal finances. But perhaps the worst part of it all is Schaub's refusal to face the truth. He's in denial about almost everything in his life. From his failed comedy specials to his lack of self-awareness, he refuses to acknowledge his flaws. Instead of using his failures as an opportunity to grow, he doubles down on his misguided beliefs, acting like the problem is always someone else. Every time something goes wrong, he's quick to point the finger. The audience doesn't get it. The critics are just haters. His co-hosts are the problem. He's never the problem in his mind. And this is a classic example of someone stuck in a cycle of failure. If you can't own up to your mistakes, how can you ever expect to improve? Schaub doesn't seem to get that. He's so caught up in his own narrative of being misunderstood that he can't see how it's holding him back. Instead of taking criticism to heart and learning from it, he pushes it away every single time. That's why people are so ready to tear him down. They're not attacking him for no reason. They're attacking him because he refuses to take responsibility for the mess he's created. At this point, Schaub is his own worst enemy. No one else can bring him down because he's already doing a great job of that on his own. And as long as he stays in this state of denial, his career and his reputation will continue to suffer. Let's be real. Brendan's comedy is terrible. He just doesn't get why people aren't laughing. And instead of taking a long, hard look at his material, he points the finger at the audience. When he bombed, he should have taken a step back, analyzed why the crowd wasn't responding, and worked on improving. Instead, he came up with every excuse in the book. The poor me routine quickly became tiresome, especially for anyone who could see how much potential he wasted by refusing to improve. Comedy is about growth. It's about learning from your failures, adapting, and finding your voice. But Schaub's ego is too big to allow for that kind of growth. He's trapped in this mindset where he believes he's already at the top and that everything he does is genius. His inability to recognize his own failures combined with a sense of entitlement is why no one's laughing. It's not the audience, Brendan. It's you. Your material isn't landing because you're not self-aware enough to improve. You're too busy blaming everyone else instead of doing the work that actually matters. Until Schaub faces this truth, his comedy will continue to fall flat, and so will his career. Here's the kicker. Brendan Schaub never grows. He's stuck in this endless loop of denial and failure, and every time he's called out on his mistakes, he refuses to acknowledge them. Instead, he just doubles down, acting like everyone else is the problem. He blames his fans, the critics, and anyone else who dares point out his flaws. This is the crux of why people keep hating on him, because no matter how many chances he's given to change, he's too proud to admit that he's made mistakes. And I mean, a long time ago, I used to truly despise Justin Bieber, but guess what? The kid grew up. He stopped being a brat. He stopped acting like the world owed him everything. And now he actually seems like a decent human being. But with Brendan Schaub, he's the same. He's still that same cocky, self-absorbed loser. He hasn't changed. He hasn't learned, and it's frustrating to watch. And as long as Schaub remains in this state of perpetual self-delusion, the only thing we can expect from him is more of the same, more failed specials, more drama, and more reasons for people to turn on him. His unwillingness to evolve is what's keeping him trapped in this cycle, and honestly, at this point, it's hard to see how he'll ever break free. The truth is, the only way out is for Schaub to look inward, accept his flaws, and acknowledge that he doesn't have it all figured out. But until that happens, he's just going to keep digging his own hole. In the end, Brendan Schaub's biggest flaw is that he refuses to confront the truth. He had everything handed to him. Fame, connections, opportunities, but he's so determined to remain the same person that he's burned every bridge he could. Instead of learning from his mistakes, he keeps making them, and now he's left with nothing but a tarnished reputation and a career on the decline. It's tragic, really. Schaub could have had it all, but his inability to change and grow has doomed him, and until he recognizes that, he'll just keep falling, one bad decision at a time.